What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Miniverse. So I finally got my Gaslands gates done. It was one of those projects that I'd work on a little bit and then set it to the side for a while and then work on a little bit more and set to the side. So finally got them finished. For those of you who don't know what the gates are for Gaslands, it's for a Deathrace. You got a start gate and a finish gate, and then a couple of other gates so that you can make different shaped courses, add to the chaos. So if you guys could go ahead and subscribe, I'll shut my mouth and we'll just get on after it. So I just started off making the bases out of some MDF, and the basing there is just baking soda, sand, and some cat litter like I've used before. And the middle I just made it exactly the size of one long template, move template. And the sides there I just made them just slightly larger than they need to be for the uprights to hold the signs up. And to make the uprights, I started off with some bamboo skewers, and I was going to use toothpicks, but I had these little wooden dowels. They're about the same size as toothpicks, and I just measured those out to 1-inch pieces, and then I nipped them off with them cutters there. Just made a whole bunch of them, and to clean up the ends a little bit, those cutters are a little rough. And then I got the bamboo skewers out for the long pieces. I marked them at 6 inches and then every 1/2 inch in between. Then I cut them off with the cutters, and they need a little more cleanup, so I got the sandpaper out. And once I had a bunch of those cut and marked, I taped them down 3/4 of an inch apart because I didn't want to do any trigonometry, and I figured 3/4 of an inch would be close enough. And so I used the tacky glue and just started gluing those down, skipping every other 1/2 inch mark. And that turned out to be pretty tedious. I ended up making 8 of them, and in that process is when I decided to make them triangular shaped instead of square shaped and cut down on the tedious a little bit. I did secure them with super glue there at the end. So to get those triangle shapes pretty evenly spaced, I used 1/2 inch pieces of foam, and I cut some little notches in there just to keep that space even. And then I lined it up, and then I just glued a couple of pieces, one on each end, just to hold it steady. Then I can pull that foam out of there and finish the build without having to have those supports in there. And once that was dry, I used those little supports to hold it kind of flat, make it easier to glue those on. And I did one side, flipped it over, used the little pieces of foam again to hold that last side flat, and put all the little bars on there. And once those were nice and dry, it was time to attach them to the bases. So I got some white glue out and some hot glue, and I did 2 of the bases in white glue, or 2 of the upright posts in white glue and 1 in hot glue. I figured that way the hot glue would hold the white glue steady while it dried, and it pretty much worked. And then for the cross beams that would hold the signs, I just used another bamboo skewer, cut it to length, and glued it on. And then for the signs themselves, I pre-cut some MDF sheets just to right about the size I wanted. I wanted them to be pretty similar in size. So then I used a little hot glue, and I just glued those right to the bottom of those cross pieces. And one more crossbar across the bottom, and that'll pretty much do it for our basic structure. Be ready to start painting, do all the fun stuff here just as soon as that dries. So I primed it with the Rust-Oleum black, and then I hit it with the Krylon iron ore color. And to weather these down, I did it at the same time, the same way I did the corrugated steel, just overbrush with the black metallic, and then stippled on some brown and some orange. And the bases, I painted those up the same way I did all the other bases. I wanted to make it match, so I just took this cheapo brown, watered it down, and almost like a wash. Just paint it up. And then with this khaki color, just do like a heavy overbrush. That's about all it takes. And I mixed up a black wash and I hit all the metal parts and just washed them all down real good. I kept it off the dirt though, I didn't want the dirt to get all black colored. And then I started adding little details from videos that I've already done, like my little barrels from the barrel videos. And some jersey barriers. And some little Nerf dart tires. And I also added some broken, smashed up car parts that I didn't get footage of. And I thought some little bits of chain wrapped around here and there would look pretty cool, so I put those in there. I think it kind of helped bring everything together. So once I had it all decorated up, I had to put the signage on there. And my initial plan was to use these little pieces of paper and glue them up there and then weather them down from there. And actually my start gate, I did leave it that way. But the rest of them, I couldn't get it to work out as well, so I ended up just tearing them off and going with a different plan. So before I could go fixing the signs, it was pointed out to me that my corrugated steel did not have enough bullet holes in them, so I added a whole bunch of bullet holes with my little tweezers there. And you probably saw these little yellow arrows that I had painted on there. I did not like them at all, so I took the brush black and I blacked it all out. And I decided to do some black and yellow striping on there, so I needed to mask some of it off, and I didn't have any tape thin enough, so I laid my knife down on the mat there and twisted that tape into it to cut off a little strip, and it's probably 1/4 of an inch, maybe a little bit over. And then I just used those little strips to mask out some lines, and I tried to make them arrow shaped so that you'd know what direction to go through the gate. And I wanted to try a little salt masking, so I got the coarse sea salt out and just used some water down the surface there, and then just sprinkled some of that salt around. This salt worked pretty good. All the chunks were different sizes, so just wanted to add some detail in there. So I did that to all 4 of those. And you can see for my finish gate here, I painstakingly made that checkerboard pattern. And then I got the airbrush out, and I started with white first, obviously for the checkerboard pattern. But I also hit the spots that I'm going to paint yellow later. I know that yellow isn't going to cover up that black very well, so I wanted to put a white base underneath it to make sure that yellow popped out real good. And once that was dry, then I got the yellow out and went over it with the yellow. And after that dried, then I went to peeling the tape off, and you can see how bright those yellow lines are. I'm going to tone them down later, but I wanted to have a nice bright yellow to start with. So now to fix my signs, I printed off just some plain stencils and used that Super 77 to glue it down to some cereal board stock. And then I painstakingly cut those little stencils out with my X-Acto knife. And then I just taped them over the little metal pieces. And then I threw some black in the airbrush and painted up the signs, and I backed it off a little bit to kind of tone down those little floor plates. And now those metal panels needed some weathering, so I got the rough iron out and I went to dry brushing it, and I kind of tried to make it look like those metal panels had been cleaned with a wire wheel on an angle grinder or drill or something. Not really sure I pulled it off, but that's kind of what I was going for. And from here, the weathering is pretty much the same as everything else that I've done. Cheapo brown, a little stipple, a little bit of dry brush, and then the cheapo orange with a little bit of stippling here and there. And now I was originally going to use washes, like a little black and a little brown, but I decided to get the soft pastels out and make some weathering powder. So I just took that kind of chocolate color and a little bit of red color, mixed them up in that little jar, and then I used a little tiny brush to kind of paint that on there. I actually used a couple of different size brushes for these to make little drips and stains. I was actually liking the way those were looking really well, so I just went ahead and mixed up a little bit more and hit the whole thing all the way around. All my barrels and corrugated steel and everything else. And I'm so impressed by using these little powders that instead of dry brushing all the dust on there, I decided to just use the tan color from the pastels and actually just put a bunch of dust on there. It's worked out pretty good. I ended up blowing most of that off because I went a little overboard with it, but I think it worked out pretty well to hit those highlights on there and make it look dusty like it's been sitting in the Wasteland. And I was having so much fun using these little powders that I was making from the pastels. I got the black out and decided to do some little skid marks on the ground plates there. And for the final decoration, I printed up some movie posters and I placed them around here and there. And then all that was left was a couple of coats of clear coat, and these guys are ready to play. Alright, so now I can finally play a Deathrace matches without using little paper proxies. I've got actual good scenery. I liked it. Let me know what you think. And if you haven't yet, please hit the subscribe button. And if you like the video, hit the thumbs up. And if you want to support the channel, there's several ways to do that underneath. Come join the Patreons. I could really use your help to keep this channel going. And thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you next time.